Welcome to the theater. We're fools. We love it so.
Smash hit in New York. Rave reviews. This is not a game with her. She has made her own place as a star on Broadway. Oh boy, I finally made it.
Brave? I thought she was brave because without a whole lot of stage experience, suddenly she's carrying a show.
She was widowed at the age of 32. With 2 children to support, she took charge of her life. Bogey knew she would eventually step out of the shadow of their storied romance.
She was Bogey's wife and just kind of a toy thing, you know, who did movies. When she went to New York, she became an actress.
A lot of people take her for granted, just think that she's just a star. Well, give me a break.
And I think she's a great role model for the younger women who are hopefully watching this.
The Lifetime of Style Award goes to Miss Lauren Bacall. This is Natasha Richardson. Tonight we celebrate a great American success story, a woman I respect and admire, Lauren Bacall.
This is going to get me into a lot of trouble. I think women are much more willing to take risks, chances with their lives, are much more honest, and are generally better friends. My mother was a great example. She was the greatest influence of my life. She was more than anyone. My mother had the greatest effect on me.
Lauren's mother, Natalie Weinstein Bacall, was born into a highly cultured Jewish family in the lavish countryside of Romania. In 1901, when her father's wheat business failed, he decided, like thousands of other immigrants, to make a new life in America. New York City became home for Natalie and her 3 brothers and sister. A working woman her whole life, in 1923 she married, but to a man she did not love. A year later, Betty Joan was born. Natalie's labor began in a prophetic locale.
She was in a movie house, which is really funny. I mean, the thought that anyone in my family would ever want to be an actor was ridiculous, of course.
Sophie often sang a German nursery rhyme to her favorite grandchild, Betty.
Betterlein, Gingelein, in der weite Welt hinein. Stock und Hut, ich steck gut. Something, something wohlgemut. Aber Betty weint so sehr. She's so sad. Hatte keine Mutter mehr.
Natalie's marriage was a disaster. The focus of her life was her beautiful, imaginative daughter.
I always pretended, and I always used to imitate, and I used to act out things, and I used to stay up nights reading fairy tales and, you know, envision myself as the princess. Rapunzel, let down your hair. Your golden hair.
Natalie was a wonderful mother, but Betty did not have a good relationship with her father.
I used to have bad dreams at night, and I used to hear footsteps coming down the hall when there weren't any footsteps. I used to hear a strap, because my father, when he hit me, would hit me with the strap.
Natalie divorced Betty's father, who then literally disappeared from her life forever.
You have, first of all, a sense of rejection, sense of wanting approval. I was always suspicious growing up, and I never thought any relationship could last. I think that that is probably one of the scars, you know, that you learn how to behave, how to put up a front, how to fool everyone if you can, and just not show that nobody's going to get to you, you know, you can handle anything.
Now, a completely new life began for Natalie, Sophie, and Betty. They moved from Brooklyn to Manhattan. It was here that Betty would know that her destiny was to be an actress. At Julia Richmond High School, Betty made a lifelong friend.
When I first met her, she hadn't quite grown into her body. I mean, none of us had, you know, that awkward age of 14, and she was always had that incredible beauty. But she was gangling and falling over herself.
And I had these enormous feet. I was a beauty. At 14, awkward beyond belief.
We used to quit school together and go to the 68th Street Playhouse as often as we could because we both adored movies.
I used to buy Rolly cigarettes and sit up in the balcony and smoke the whole pack. Just feel like Betty Davis. I was watching Betty Davis, she was smoking. I wanted to be like Betty Davis. When she was doomed in Dark Victory, oh my God, I thought the world had come to an end. Sobbing. It was just... She made me feel more than anybody else did.
Dear, I love you so.
Oh, nonsense.
'Tisn't. I can't live without you.
Please get up. You're making a fool of yourself and a fool of me.
Oh, Phil, please.
When Betty Davis made a visit to New York, arrangements were made for 14-year-old Betty to actually meet her idol.
And finally the door opened, and out she came. You're Betty Bacall. I shook my hand. Yes. So, you want to be an actress? Yes. Well, I was so in awe of her that I couldn't think. The tension was indescribable.
If Betty ever dreamed of becoming a film star, that dream evaporated after she spent 3 nights in the theater. Now she was completely stage-struck.
Gielgud, I was in a trance. When that curtain came down, I didn't know where I was. I started to walk out. I bumped into people. I didn't know. I've never been so affected.
Katharine Hepburn in the Philadelphia Story.
She was so beautiful. Oh, fabulous. And I was up in the 3rd balcony, 55-cent seats. I almost fell out of the balcony. I was leaning over. I was looking at her, and you know who was in the play with her? Joseph Cotton, Van Heflin. Not a bad cast.
Finally, she saw Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh.
When I saw them in Romeo and Juliet, that was when I was still in high school. When you have those 3 things hit you between the eyes, you're never the same. If I'd never thought of being an actress, I would have thought of being an actress because of that.
At 15, Betty graduated from high school and after an audition was accepted as a student at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Good proportions, physical condition, blonde, pleasing personality, voice low. See, I even had a low voice then. New York regionalism, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Jewish, but does not look it. Some instinct, everything to learn.
Betty's mother could only afford the tuition for 1 year. Not discouraged, Betty worked as a theater usher, so she got to see many plays.
I was in a show at the Lyceum, I think it's West 43rd, and there was an usherette, and she sort of swept through my line of vision, and I thought, who's that lanky kid with a kind of a cat's face?
That lanky kid had a lot of nerve.
I used to stand outside of Sardi's, and I used to say to the doorman, point out to me if there's anyone in the theater, because I wasn't ever thinking of movies. I only thought of myself on the stage.
Her efforts paid off. She got her first stage role in a play that never made it to Broadway. So began a chain of events. To earn money, Betty turned to modeling, where she was noticed by the editor of Harper's Bazaar, Diana Vreeland.
They wanted a more natural look, and not such a studied model's look. And that was why she started to use me, which was great for me, changed my life.
Diana put Betty on the cover. The Inside Story commented that Betty longed to be an actress. All this caught the attention of Slim Hawkes, wife of the famous Hollywood director Howard Hawks.
She showed him these photographs and thought that I was interesting looking, and maybe he should test me. And he looked at them and, oh yeah, maybe. He was very influenced by her. And that's how it all began.
At the age of 18, Betty Bacall said farewell to Manhattan and her dream to be a star on the Broadway stage. All by herself, she took a train across America to the movie capital of the world.
I was so ambitious. I was so anxious to have another kind of life.
Finally, Howard Hawks put Betty on contract at $100 per week. She waited for months. As long as the male lead agreed, Betty would play the love interest in the remake of Ernest Hemingway's novel To Have and Have Not.
Howard said, I always thought of you being in a movie with either Humphrey Bogart or Cary Grant. I said, oh, Cary Grant? Fabulous. Humphrey Bogart. And then, of course, he decided on Bogart. We filmed the test, and then waited and waited and didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember as I was walking into Howard's office, Bogey was coming out. And he said, I've just seen your test. We'll have a lot of fun together. Hardy har har, little did he know.
Filming began on Betty's first movie. 45-year-old Humphrey Bogart was a seasoned and respected star of stage and screen. He had a volatile relationship with his third wife, Mayo Matho. There was excessive drinking and jealousy. On the set, he was professional and caring with his young leading lady.
The kidding around on the set was to relax me. He knew how nervous I was. He could tell how nervous I was. It was quite apparent. And of course, I was hanging on Howard's every word, and I was apprehensive, you know, working with Bogey. And also, I was warned by various people that Bogey's wife was a woman who hallucinated a lot and who was sure that he was having affairs with everyone that he worked with, and that she was very tough and that she'd drop a lamp on my head if I wasn't careful. I was certainly thrilled with that bit of news.
Luckily, Betty discovered how to steady her trembling head.
I found that by holding my head at a certain angle and looking up, I could hold it still. And so I could either look to the side or look up, but I held my chin down, and that's how it became the look.
Bogart went nuts over her because, I mean, she was an extraordinary presence as a 20-year-old. I mean, she had the poise and the manner of a much older woman.
Betty and Bogey were falling in love. Many of their clandestine meetings took place on his sailboat.
It was dangerous, of course. Whenever there's danger, there's romance. It just evolved and just became this frantic, hysterical thing when he would be calling me up at 3 in the morning, having left wherever he was, home or wherever, 3 sheets to the wind, and come pick me up on Wilshire Boulevard. Or, you know, my mother, the phone was, where do you think you're going at this hour? I said, I'm going to meet him. She said, you can't go meet him at this hour. Yes, I can. I wouldn't believe it. She was horrified. She did not think highly of him at all. He's a married man. 3 times.
In 1944, To Have and Have Not was released, featuring Humphrey Bogart and introducing Lauren Bacall. The film was a hit, and Bacall lit up the screen.
I remembered her, and of course then I saw her on the screen, and that was that lanky girl with a cat's face that was briefly an usherette at the Lyceum Theater.
Lauren captured the heart of every American male, including Vice President Harry Truman. But the only heart Betty wanted to win was Bogey's. He proposed with a proviso.
He said, I want a wife, and I want my wife with me. And so I'm not saying not to work, but you must promise not to go off on location, not to, you know. And I said, of course, of course. I wanted to give him what he'd never had. I mean, I wanted to give him a family life anyway. I wanted to give him children, which he never had. And, you know, so, of course, he had reached a point in his life where he never thought he would have it. He thought it would never, it was never meant to be for him, that he would always have, just live the way he lived and never have children and never have a really happy marriage. So I made that promise, and I stuck to it. And in view of the fact that we had such a short time together, I must say I'm damn glad I did.
Miss Bacall is 20. Mr. Bogart, married 3 times before, is 45.
The wedding march started. Bogey was waiting downstairs. George was upstairs for me. Started the wedding march. No bride. George leans over the banister and says, "She's in the can." He was crying and I was shaking. What a pair.
In those days, some hit movies were reenacted on radio. The Bogarts played out their most famous love scene.
The Lux Radio Theater brings you Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall in To Have and Have Not.
You know you don't have to act with me, Steve. You don't have to say anything and you don't have to do anything. Not a thing. Oh, maybe just whistle. You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.
You just put your lips together and...
Inexplicably, Warner's decided to release Lauren's third film. She was hopelessly miscast, and the movie flopped. Plus, moviegoers wanted to see her with Bogey, not Charles Boyer.
They almost ruined her, really, with bad judgment.
After Confidential Agent, they said, "We made a terrible mistake. This girl is a horror. Send her back where she came from."
So young, and to be, you know, up there and then pilloried, and then have to sort of fight your way, and be, I'm sure in her mind she must have been agonized and felt such a tremendous failure.
And had it not been for Bogey, of course, who gave me courage and also stability. I mean, the same kind of stability that my mother gave me, except, of course, he was a man.
To salvage the situation, Warner's released 3 more Bogey and Bacall films. The Big Sleep, Dark Passage, and Key Largo.
I say smack her and let it go at that. Smacking her isn't enough for such an insult. He'd have to kill her. Then he'd have to kill the rest of us because we witnessed it. To kill us all or nothing.
Little wildcat. Smell blood, huh?
Their passion for each other was as real in life as it was on the screen.
She was very much in love with him. It wasn't just a movie Hollywood thing. She really was very much involved with him. And the boat was a big thing in their lives. Bogart loved that boat, and she loved being on that boat with him, and they spent a lot of very happy times on the boat.
Betty relished their private moments, and she thrived in Hollywood's limelight as well. However, Betty soon decided it was time to start a family.
When I told him I was pregnant, we argued because he suddenly realized that something was coming between us. And it bothered him, it upset him. And of course, he loved it after that.
In 1949, Stephen was born. Betty was a natural parent. Bogey, well, he had a harder time of it.
Well, I take my son outside and I say, look, you see up there, there's a moon up there, and there are stars in the sky, and it's nighttime. And that's when you see these things. Nobody didn't know how to talk to them.
2 years later, director John Huston gave Bogey the lead role, starring with Katharine Hepburn in the film The African Queen. Bogey wanted his wife with him on location. Betty arranged for her mother to take care of 2-year-old Stephen and set off on a great adventure.
John Huston always chose the most impossible locations. And this certainly was an impossible location in the Belgian Congo, about as far away from humanity as you could get. They built a camp, you know, they made a camp for us, made out of bamboo, trees, and palm leaves. It was an adventure, all right, but it was great, though. I wouldn't have missed the trip for anything on earth.
6 months later, in London, the Bogart family was reunited. Bogey won an Oscar for his performance in The African Queen, and Betty was thrilled to be pregnant once again. Of course, a growing family needs a larger home.
I never thought of just adding on, so we moved, which Bogey used to say, there are some women when they're pregnant that want pickles, but my wife wants houses.
Leslie was born. Bogey was amazed.
To Bogey, she was this flower. Little girl, she's a flower. He was like this, like tiptoeing around. He would touch her fingers, hold her hand, look at her with wonder, this little girl.
Good evening, Miss Bacall.
In 1954, Edward R. Murrow interviewed America's most glamorous couple on live television.
I remember both of you are natives of New York. Do you miss this big town very much?
Yes.
Wait a minute. Well, that's a nice, normal family disagreement, but tell me, don't either of you get a yen to do a Broadway play?
Yes,
No. I think, I'll tell you what, I think that you're going to run into kind of a traffic jam if you ask two actors one question. I think you better take us one by one.
He finally had a family. He finally had a happy marriage. He finally was living in a beautiful house. His work was going well.
Good night, Stephen.
Good night.
Good night.
Doom waiting around the corner.
A close friend of Betty's was then married to Welsh actor Richard Burton. She recalls when Bogey first became ill.
I suspected it in London. He'd come to the Old Vic to see Richard do a play, and he was coughing all the way through the performance. And I think Richard sent him out a little thing of pastilles in the intermission as a joke, because we could hear him coughing, you know. And I remember being a bit alarmed then.
Tests revealed Bogey had cancer of the esophagus.
And I remember in the car going to the hospital, Bogey holding my hand and saying, you know, I've never been to doctors, and now I'll probably spend the rest of my life going to them. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I never thought in terms of endings.
Sick as he was, Bogey encouraged Betty to star in the film Designing Woman with Gregory Peck.
He came sailing into the harbor there and tied up alongside our movie location. He said, "Hey, kid, I hear you're a Catholic." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, say a Hail Mary for me," he said. Interesting and dramatic to do a comedy while Bogey was on his last legs. We knew that he wanted her to work, and when the picture was over, and he said, "Well, Betty stays home and looks after me." He said, that's how you can tell the ladies from the broads," he said.
I went to pick the children up from Sunday school and came home, and he had gone into a coma, and that was it. My Steve was 8. He wrote in his little book, he said, "Daddy died."
The word for Bogey, for Betty too, by the way, I think it's gallantry.
I had a series of horrible events after Bogey died. My mother had her first major Eisenhower-type heart attack. out of the blue. Thank God I was in New York at the time. I was not thinking straight at all, I don't think, for quite a while after. I behaved perfectly acceptably, but I made a lot of wrong decisions, lots of mistakes.
After Bogey died, Frank Sinatra paid great attention to his friend's widow.
I think I was just searching for continuity. And he was part of our scene anyway. We saw so much of Frank. We became really good friends. For the last few years of Bogey's life, he was very much a part of our lives. So it was almost natural, you know. In any event, it didn't work out, and it was okay that it didn't work out.
With Bogey gone, Hollywood seemed more and more bleak to Betty.
Betty had to get out and make a living, and Betty went, maybe when the movie roles began to slow down a bit, she went back to Broadway.
I was so frightened for her, wondering what she would do, and she just came to New York, and I mean, it's the best thing she ever did.
I think they all thought of me as Mrs. Bogart anyway, you know. They never took me seriously as an actress. So I felt it was time for me to be on the stage and to find out if I could do it.
After abandoning New York and the theatre she so loved, Betty was 35 years old when she returned to star in the play George Axelrod had written for her, Goodbye, Charlie. She played the role of a man reincarnated in a woman's body.
She got out on that stage in front of a live audience, first time I've ever really done it in her life, without a nerve in her body. Or if she did, boy, she hit it. Man, she was ice cold and tough and absolutely brilliant.
Well, I found out that I could do it. And that was a great reward for me, because after all, it was my original ambition. And that's when I met Jason.
The star, Lauren Bacall, and brilliant actor, Jason Robards Jr., were instantly attracted to each other. In the 60s, Robards was best known for his roles in the plays of Eugene O'Neill.
Then again, something wonderful happened in my life. And I mean, so it took a while because he was married. See, again, I was. All the things that I had been told, all of the things that I believed in, end up with married men. I don't understand how that happened, but it happened twice.
In 1961, Betty and Jason were married. They moved with her children into a spacious apartment. A year later, their son, Sam, was born. Concentrating on her family and husband, Betty put her career on hold for 2 years. Betty was eager to return to the stage. Her chance came in 1965, when she revealed her natural wit and timing in the comedy Cactus Flower.
That play was a smash hit. I stayed with it for 2 years, never missed a performance, and sold out all the time.
Although her career was now back on track, Betty had to face the tormenting fact that her marriage was falling apart.
It was clear that there were terrible problems. I knew some of them. A lot of them I did not know. She was very matter-of-fact about it. She was in great pain, and it was very difficult for her.
It took me a while. It's not easy to, you know, to make that kind of break. We liked a lot of things about one another. But Jason also had a tough time in his life, you know, and he had his own demons, as everyone does. You learn a lot as you get older. And then sometimes you don't learn anything. As you know.
As it was with Bogey's death, bad things come in clusters. Betty's 8-year marriage was over, and then her beloved mother died.
Natalie was an extraordinary woman who spoke her mind about everything in the world. And indeed, everybody says about Betty that, well, she took her thing from Bogart. I think she took her thing from her mom.
What can you say? Your mother, especially a mother you get on with. It's enormous. And they'd been such a team.
You never get over it, that loss. But after all, that is who has given you life.
Bacall is a triumph of industry along with charisma and talent that defies the law of possibility. There's no reason before the fact that she should have been able to star in a musical. Not only star in a musical, but knock down records across the country and abroad. I mean, there's this huge ability.
Lauren Bacall is among the few actresses who, after the age of 40, transformed herself into a musical comedy star. She accepted the lead role in Applause, based on the film All About Eve, starring Betty Davis as Margot Channing. The book was written by friends, Betty Comden and Adolph Green, husband of another good friend, Phyllis Newman.
One of her absolute cores is her physical and sort of spiritual strength. That when she pulls herself up, it's like a great star does, she becomes something else. And it's very right for musicals, because she was playing, you know, a star.
The challenge of preparing for her role in Applause was both strenuous and exhilarating. For months, daily voice lessons, followed by endless hours of dance rehearsal.
One of the great songs was, the first one was But Alive. But I feel bitchy and twitchy and manic, and panic, but alive, but alive. But alive, but that is the story of my life in actual fact, I mean, in many ways.
She was nervous to the bone, but ready to make her debut.
And Noel Coward had sent me an opening night wire, you know. Don't be nervous, darling. It all depends on you.
Welcome to the theater, to the magic, to the fun, where painted trees and flowers grow and laughter rings fortissimo and treachery sweetly done.
When you spend a lot of your life in the shadow of somebody else, you really need to have a sense of accomplishment of your own.
You'll learn to kill with sheer delight. You'll only come alive at night.
And I think I felt it solidly for the first time in Applause.
Welcome to the theater. We're fools. We love it so.
Broadway had a new star.
I mean, you can't imagine extraordinary audience. Jammed all the time. Otto Preminger came back. He said, "You were marvelous." I said, "Why do you sound so surprised?" He said, "Because I am."
Backstage one night, Betty Davis paid the ultimate compliment to Lauren Bacall, the quaking teenager she had met more than 30 years ago.
She stood at the door of my dressing room and said, "Nobody could have done this but you. And you know I mean that."
Walter Matthau presented Lauren Bacall with her first Tony. Incurably romantic, she fell for her co-star, Len Cariou.
We had a great romance. Absolutely. Never fall in love with your leading man. Never get involved with the people you work with. Well, I'm not a great example. No, yes, oh yeah, we had a lovely time. So I spent 5 years of my life on that show, but it was worth it.
After 5 years touring the world with Applause, Betty was courted by feature films. She starred in Murder on the Orient Express and The Shootist, starring John Wayne. In 1978, Lauren Bacall revealed a new talent. She wrote her own autobiography, By Myself, which won the National Book Award. 2 years later, she was back on Broadway, starring in the musical Woman of the Year. It was based on the film that starred her friend Kate Hepburn.
It was all done because of Betty. It's one of those shows that was only done because she wanted to do it.
Woman of the Year was a huge success, and Betty won her second Tony.
She has never missed a performance on the stage. Never. Her understudy, her standbys can forget about it, and she gives all out every single performance. She's quite something.
How do you keep it fresh, they all say? It's your job to keep it fresh. The audiences are different every night. You have to keep it fresh. You cannot sleepwalk through a performance. I've never understood how an actor can do that. You have to give it everything you've got. 150%.
In 1986, Betty had a triumph on the London stage in Tennessee Williams' Sweet Bird of Youth.
It was wonderful. I just arrived in England a few days earlier, so I saw lots of the press coverage of it. And, I mean, the stuffy old London Times said something that if the audience had imagined that they heard some applause in the distance, it was probably Bogey sitting in the gods, applauding his baby.
What I think is important is we all have to get through our lives the way we get through them. I mean, the time goes too damn quickly, God knows. And I keep looking at the obit page and look to see how old everybody is. Makes me very nervous. But I don't dwell on that.
Lauren Bacall is blessed with boundless energy. Every year she visits her favorite cities, Paris and London, but her home is in New York. It is filled with mementos from her travels and photos of her family and friends.
I've been lucky in my friendships. I'm very fortunate. I have some wonderful, wonderful friends, old-time friends that everyone cannot appear for me, but by God, they're great.
We took a trip to Paris once together, just the two of us, and we were like, I mean, we were not that young then, and we just were like two kids, you know, walking around, feeling romantic, talking about guys.
You can, to this day, you can introduce her to somebody and she'll blush. I mean, she really is a romantic in every sense of the word. I mean, she has crushes.
She will consult me quite seriously about whether it's all right to kiss someone goodnight on a first date.
But it's very attractive. It's very sweet, you know.
She has an enormous, for this great sophisticated creature that she plays, just right up around the, wants something, just whistle. So everybody whistles, she'd flee, she'd hide under the couch.
And if she should fall in love?
I think it would be wonderful. But I kid her all the time. I said, you wouldn't give up the closet space. And there's a certain amount of truth to that.
Yeah, where would he hang his pair of pants?
Betty's interpretation of the mother garnered her a coveted Golden Globe Award and an Academy Award nomination as Best Supporting Actress. With all the raves and predictions for an Oscar, unexpectedly, she did not win.
I was astounded. The next day after that, I went down to somewhere, Costa Mesa, further south than that, where she was doing a lecture for an audience of like 500 women, and to see her with this bravura, you know, carrying that, because that's a big blow. Yeah. She has guts, real guts.
She has elegance and style, plus.
In 1997, she won the highest praise, a Kennedy Center Lifetime Achievement Award. In 1998, Bacall, who never attended college, received an honorary degree from Columbia University. While she has received numerous awards, her greatest satisfaction comes from her family.
I love my grandchildren, and they are lovely, all of them. Sweet, smart, adorable.
So is buying stuff for the grandchildren, and this one, she's like, well, he won't appreciate it, but I'm going to buy it, I like it, you know? So her mind is on those kids.
I think to have my children happy and healthy and going along in whatever direction they want to and have a fulfilling life, I don't think you can ask too much more than that.
No, she's immensely loyal. And, I mean, when the chips are down, if one really needed help, she'd be the first one there, you know, to chiding you, but there and helping you.
I want to function. I want to be able to work in my life. I want to be able to continue to do that.
I think that she should do another show, and I think another musical.
I might gimp a little bit, but I'd make it.